I'm Bob Riggio. With me is Dan Lindblom, one of our veterans. We have so many veterans here in the Black Hills area, and I love this job, Dan. I love talking to you veterans, and I love hearing your story. And I hope the folks listening in also enjoy those stories, because they've been incredible, they've been interesting, and it just tells the story of what these veterans had to go through to help keep this country the way it is right now. So Dan, thank you for taking the time to talk to us. I want you to start off, first of all, you're born and raised in South Dakota.
Yes. After high school, I graduated in high school in 1954 and went to Brookings.
South Dakota State.
South Dakota State.
Okay.
Ended up in general registration, not knowing for sure what I wanted to do. By the time I'd been there a while, I decided that what I wanted to do was stay in agriculture, because I came off a farm background. I like livestock, so that's what I wanted to do. But the draft was hanging over us.
What year was this about? This was in the early 50s, correct?
Right, it was 51 when I graduated from high school, wasn't it? They were fighting, taking people and sending them to places that I didn't feel like I wanted to defend. I said I was a mean man and didn't mind dying, but I didn't want to do it over there. And
I don't blame you one bit.
so I didn't like marching around in the morning, pretending I was going to be there.
Because were you in ROTC?
Yes.
In Brookings?
Yes. It was ROTC, and you'd get out early in the morning and march around on the lawn for a while, and then go take that uniform off and go to class.
So working on the ranch, you didn't mind getting up, dealing with some cows, but you didn't want to get up early and do the marching thing.
No, and it was kind of pointless as far as I was concerned. But I did find out there was an inactive Naval Reserve unit there, and there was probably a dozen old guys they weren't old at that time either, but they had been in the service, and they had got that inactive unit there at Brookings. And I joined that. So when the draft was getting closer to me at the end of my third year in college, every county had a draft board, I suppose.
Yeah.
I know ours did. And every county seemed to have based on the number of people or whatever, they had a kind of a quota to fill. So if you watched the numbers, you kind of knew where you were at. You knew what your number was. So at Christmas time when I went back home, I had checked with the draft board, and my number was getting fairly close. The Navy didn't want me unless the Army was going to get me, so I volunteered for induction in the Army and got a notice and took my physical and passed it. Then the Army would take me. They wanted to send me to Great Lakes Naval Training Center on Lake Michigan, north of Chicago.
I know exactly where that's happening.
Inactive Naval, they had called me in twice while I was in the reserve. So I went in and did my basic. At the end of there, when you graduated from that, you were in the Navy, and then they would bring you into a room in your class order and have a bunch of places you could go for further training. Finally, I said, well, what can I go to that I don't have to extend for that year? I don't want to spend that time.
You wanted to get back on the range.
Yeah. They said, well, you could be a machinist mag, and I said, fine, what do they do? So they sent me to that school, and that was duck soup for a cowboy. I told this yeoman that was doing I said, what I would really like is shore duty on the West Coast. He thought that was hard to understand, but during the war, when we'd taken a trip out there, I'd seen these guys riding up and down the coast carrying a rifle looking for somebody to shoot, but that was not a choice for me. Since I couldn't get shore duty on the West Coast, I said, well, what else is there? And he said, well, there's 2 submarine tenders, and they never go anywhere. He's kind of mad by that time. And I said, fine, sign me up for one of those. I got on the list to the AS-17 Nereus. The Nereus was the name of the submarine.
Name of the submarine tender.
Yeah, the submarines that were attached to that would come back into port and pull in right next to us, against us, and tie up to us. Then they could take on supplies, fuel, and had access to doctors dentist, barber shop. Now, I checked into sub-engine overhaul was the name of the division that I checked into.
Okay.
And I got in there in the afternoon and reported to the guy that was in charge of it. And he said, this is the day we have to send somebody up to chief's quarters or chief's mess to see a mess cook for 3 months. And since you're a new guy and our other guy is coming off, you're going to go to chief mess quarters, which I didn't know anything about either, but they sent me up there and I reported there. And they put me to work. And this happened to be the evening they were pulling out of port to go out to sea. They did that monthly. So I'm in the galley cooking. They're doing ribs.
Have you ever cooked ribs before this?
No.
So you went on the ship thinking you're going to be a machinist, but you ended up being a cook in the galley.
Yeah, it's not all bad.
No. And now you're out to sea too. You thought for sure you'd stay.
Well, they put me to washing dishes in this deep sink. I washed very few dishes, but I went out and fed the fish. But it turned out great duty, really. I enjoyed it. I hadn't been there very long. There was, I think, 8 of us that reported to a first-class commissaryman that was doing the cooking.
You were in the Navy for 2 years, and basically your specialty was in the galley, and then you got out of the service and you were in reserves for 8 years.
Yeah.
But you pretty much stayed on. You went back to agriculture, the ranching, when you got out of the service.
As fast as I could.
As fast as you could. Dan, thank you so much for spending the time with us. I really do appreciate it, really do. And thank you for cooking those ribs. I bet you came out a few pounds heavier than what you were when you went in.
Not many.
No?
Not really.
All right. Thanks a lot, Dan. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.